hello. Right, we're here now. That's great. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you. Well, you can't actually see all the smiling faces because you've got masks on, but I'm assuming you're smiling, so it's great to be here. Hang on, I've got to put my glasses on because I'm the old fart up here and can't see as well. My name's David Yarnton. I'm a CEO and co-founder of a company called Edge, which I won't go into detail, but I've been in video games for over 35 years. That's why I look this age. Starting off in Australia, so my accent's a little bit different. Marketing 8-bit consoles and Game & Watch before I joined Nintendo as their sales and marketing director. And then I was deported to the UK. Well, actually, a reverse convict being sent back to the UK. I told people that we would tap them on the shoulder, I think in 2003. So I was managing director of Nintendo UK from 2003. And then in 2018, joined GFINITY as a founding director of that company. And in 2018, set up Edge, which I'll go through a little bit later. Well, I won't do a plug, but come up and talk to me about Edge, because we're on a mission to revolutionise influencer marketing and data and human there. I suppose I have a bit of grey hair because I counted James Dean on the end, who's a co-chair with me on UKI's Esports Group. UKI is the Video Games Trade Association in the UK, and we're both on that board. And I'm also a board member of the British Esports Association. I'm going to do a quick run through with our guests just to introduce them so you know a little bit about their background, because we haven't got a lot of time, so I'm going to rattle through that, but hopefully I don't undersell them. I'm going to start, I've got to get my order right, but Thomas FELLGER here on my left is a founding partner and group CEO of the Icon Group, which is a global innovation group offering full-service information from data, ideas to scale up. And also they have a VC company as well to invest in some of this innovation and product. He's also the president and founder, which is actually much more important for us here, of VERITAS, who are creating unique gaming experiences and have opened up their first venue in Berlin, from which I hear is cutting edge as far as esports venues go. I mean, in the old days I would have said GFINITY, but I'm not there now, so I've got to be sort of spread it around a bit. And then we've got Mathieu LACROUTS from the CEO of the Hurrah.group. I've got to try and get the French accent on that, don't I? But you'll explain it. And I really like Mathieu because he's a big Counter-Strike fan. I've been playing it for 22 years, and that's one of my favourite games as such as well. So he's an avid gamer, passionate about advertising, and he decided to mix everything by launching Hurrah. The name was inspired by the intense emotion he felt as a fan when watching a game. So, hurrah when you're playing games. Okay, Marc, and we have a lot in common. Well, quite a bit. He's with GFINITY. I was with GFINITY. He used to be with a company called REGEUR and Beckenhauser, which were based in Slough. Nintendo is based in Slough. So, yeah, it's 2 degrees of separation here. But he's the head of commercial and digital partnerships at GFINITY, and has had a background with Blizzard, Sony, as I mentioned before, REGEUR, in developing partnerships and sponsorships. But he's also a big StarCraft fan, so everyone here has a certain amount of, I'd say, gaming, experience and fans. I'm going to kick off straight away, over the question to get the panel, but companies that sponsor esports are seen by millions of esports fans around the world, but still brands tend to underestimate the fragmentation of esports fans among the many games, leagues, teams and players, and as a result they risk spending their money unwisely and ending up, like so many unseasoned gamers, getting ganked. Now, we put a term in there, ganked, when we're talking to brands, and brands go, what does that mean? So it's also part of the language that we have to use when we're talking to brands, and vice versa. I think esports teams and players and people involved area also have to know how to talk to the people they want to get the money from. So, you know, try not to use too many colloquialisms. How do esports fans react to campaigns? What are the best practices in esports management? How do you find the right type of game as a brand to develop a partnership with? And finally, what are the top of mind brands should we consider before entering this space? So my first question to the panel, and hopefully we can get through a lot of answers, because I got the easy job. I just ask the questions. They've got to give up all the information. So many industries have been disasters in marketing. such as Coca-Cola when they did the new Coke that nobody liked and people actually hated. Hoover did a promotion that cost them $66 million and 6 years in court. So these are more traditional examples of brands making marketing mistakes. But what happens if they do that with esports, or if they don't do the right thing in there? There's so many common mistakes they can make. So what do brands need to understand when looking to engage with the esports community? And I think the thing that comes up quite a bit is empathy and authenticity. So maybe anyone want to kick off first? Perhaps Mathieu. Yeah. Yeah. Cheers.
Is this working? Okay. I have to speak louder than you know. I think we've been speaking about authenticity for brands, for advertiser in the industry for a while now. I think we're past that. I think why brands need to understand is that you need to commit to this industry when you're entering it. So I think you need to make sure that whatever you want to do in esports, you commit to it and you're just not a sponsor anymore. I think we're past that moment where just being a sponsor is enough, and you need to consider what's the purpose you want to bring. Maybe you just want to entertain that esports community, and so you add values. I have a couple of examples about this if we want to talk about them, but if you want to talk about values, if you want to bring diversity to this space, if you want to bring luxury standard because you're Gucci or whatever, you need to stick to your purpose and make sure you apply it, and then it shows that you're committed. And I think the worst example we can see, and we can talk about them, I think there might be a couple of questions on this, but comes from advertisers that miss that mark, and they just half go through esports, they half deliver, they just sponsor, but they don't activate, they don't go full in, and I think that's what's required to do a proper integration.
I would add, every brand we work with, they treat this as a campaign, what they want to do. And I think it's totally wrong. We're in the esports / gaming. I think it's actually the end is gaming, and then you work your way up to esports. Is that you have to understand as a brand that this is not a campaign you're doing. What you're doing is building a community for the future, which understands that you really take them serious not on a campaign level, but more on a timeline where you start somewhere and then you hopefully have a vision for them, what they will do with you. And what we see is actually the only clients we take on is if they understand that this is a multi-year engagement where you have KPIs such as growing the community, engagement with the community, data you flow back and forth and distribute for each other assets, which we call currency of exchange. So most of the brands burn their fingers, yes, and with DSL or wherever, there's a lot of money spent, but in a way that they had not thought it through. And now they all go backwards and say, oh, I don't know if this really works. If you question the gaming community as an advertising group you want to engage with, you should not be in marketing. And if you want to do something with them, then start slow and build something up and not overpromise some bullshit because you put a sticker on a game. So I think that's the core, and that from my perspective.
James, I always love the story about Mercedes in Hamburg. I think it was Hamburg, wasn't it? And how language can affect, and then how to change. Do you want to relate that maybe?
I think when we think about the esports community, it's not a community, it's thousands of communities. We're basically addressing these quite niche environments of a kind of cross-culture and that rotates around a particular IP, right, the game. So when we apply those brands to that particular community, we take quite careful effort to make sure that that story is completely integrated. So David, you mentioned Mercedes. I think DHL is a good example too, where in those examples we're specifically looking at Dota 2, and actually we considered even then which events, what cultures are basically rotating around the country we're in as well. So a good example here is probably DHL, where we launched in Birmingham in the UK, of course. It's the home of DHL as well, so they have a connection with that. And we kind of discovered that, you know, the British drinking crowd, they can be quite into a meme or a joke. And we brought out the Effie bot, full of cupcakes with Sir Action Slats, and the crowd goes crazy. They start chanting DHL. The marketing director from DHL can't believe her eyes, or is, because everyone's chanting the name. And then we go to Germany, and we try to do a similar thing. We think, oh, we'll roll out the FEBot, we'll bring one of the commentators out there. But of course it falls on deaf ears in that circumstance, because it didn't resonate with the community that we were approaching. So it completely failed, in effect. So if you talk to DHL now, they would say, our pivotal event for all of our esports activations is Dota 2 and ESL 1 Birmingham. And I think that speaks a lot to the fact that, you know, between us here, we represent so many different of those niche audiences, and we have to be really careful and tailor that experience for them.
No, you know, I think that's really interesting. What about some of the best practices that you've seen? I mean, I think you talked about DHL, and I think with any marketing, though, you need to be learning all the time and getting to know your audience, and each audience can be different as such. And then I suppose on the same side as when we look at some of the best practices, always the worst practice now, you don't have to name companies, and hopefully if they have done something bad, they've learnt from that and improved upon it. Any sort of examples? I think people, when they can see examples, they can picture in their eye a lot more.
For me, one of our, and it's of course it's on one of our clients, but we're not doing their strategy. We have not been the mastermind behind it. So BMW, if you watch BMW closely right now, they're building a really cool community around gaming. They invested in 6 the top esports teams. They have done a lot of surrounding stuff, conferences that never existed, and invited the whole industry. They're doing their own formats. So for example, in Berlin, they do it in our facility, the Berlin Brawl, where they bring their esports professionals in and let them play, for example, old arcade games for the fun of it, right? Where 60, 70,000 people watch it on Twitch live, which is a huge success for that. And they're building on top of that, not only that they have invested in all the esports teams, which means they don't have to pick the game they like, they don't have to pick a community within the community, because they go cross the esports teams with all the games they have, and they pick what they see, it's resonating, they pick on a monthly, quarterly basis what really is coming, so they do their own manga kind of comic thing with all the esports teams. And now what we do is we bring this in a digital thing to life, so that they have probably in the future maybe digital products to sell, not even cars, but a digital thing. And I think they're doing a perfect job, a really perfect job to show and showcasing what can be done if you take it serious and you do it step by step.
Marc, I was going to ask.
Yeah, I think when you look at the bigger space, you know, brands have the tendency to think esports, we can treat that the same way as we do sports marketing, and that's not the case. Because you have to find something that resonates with the crowd, and you have to have that discussion. So I think when we look back at League of Legends, they did a finals in Rotterdam, and they actually partnered up with a good cause, with Sanguine. And I don't know if you guys know the League of Legends game so much, but the first time you get a kill in the game is called First Blood. And they partnered up with Sanguine to do the First blood drive. And right outside of the venue, there was a blood sort of collection point where people could donate blood for medical purposes. And that later spawned an additional partnership in the US, which was also the First blood drive. So you're creating an organic way in which the consumer interacts with your brand, because it's first blood, it's relevant to the game, it's a relevant message. And then it's also a message that transcends the game and calls you to do something outside of the game in an action. So something like that, that was a really, really good partnership. And you can see that Red Bull does something similar, right? So they have the Red Bull Baron Power Play, which is a message, again, it's in the game, it's this pivotal moment where, where everybody gets a surge of power, it accelerates the game, and it moves everything along faster. That's exactly the message that Red Bull has. It gives you wings, it gives you power, and you run faster because of it. So it's a natural fit and a natural message. And the way that they tackled it was that particular element they sponsored, but they also used that as a springboard to then launch their own platforms. It's kind of what you said with what BMW is doing. They launch their own platforms and their own tournaments and their own content series in those games, which build upon that partnership as well.
If I may add, those examples that Marc just gave are really good because they go back to the purpose. What's the purpose of the brand? Obviously, when it's about blood donation, you kind of get it. But that's the same for BMW. What's the purpose? They wanted to find a way to elevate the scene, so they did conferences and whatnot. And the same for DHL. What's the purpose brand? It's to deliver a package, so they find ways to activate that was close to this. I think one example that struck with me is still sticking with cars, but it's something that happened in the US. It was with Ford, and they did a partnership with Rocket League, and they went for the sole purpose of entertaining the crowd. And what they did, so they didn't just look at esports. They created a Rocket League car, a Ford Rocket League car, so first and foremost. Then they did proper commercial to advertise that thing, and then they sponsored the event. And what they did within that sponsorship is that they created, just like you have in the NBA, they created break time when they would create trick contests on Rocket League with their own car. And so they basically entertained the breaking time of the Rocket League championships by maintaining the live broadcasts, not going to commercial breaks or anything. They probably just paid to get that segment on, and they keep entertaining through their product an audience that was quite engaged.
No, I think sort of these practical examples of big brands learning and getting close to the community, and that's one of the things that video games always had in the esports is this real community side of things. And I know at Nintendo we always used to think about our community as being a very valuable commodity and protect it as such. A lot of people here that are not in esports hear about some really big tournaments and huge audiences, huge prize money, but these numbers don't always flow down the food chain, and with new teams and companies competing for probably very limited sponsorship and promotional funds, they may be a little bit loose with the truth sometimes on the size of the audience or what they're representing. I think I mentioned in the beginning the gaming word of ganked, and basically for any brands that are here sort of listening, it's about defrauding someone or using an underhand means to defeat or kill a lesser experienced opponent. So to some extent, I don't like to sort of say, we have spoken, I think, in the past of esports being a bit like the Wild West, moving really quickly and fast, and new entrants or people coming into it, beware as such. How can brands avoid being ganked as such? What should they be looking for when they're looking at numbers and things? And where can they potentially look for credible data and information?
I think as an industry and across the board, we have a huge responsibility to ensure we're living up to promises, right? Especially now these non-endemic brands are coming in. Their stakes are much, much higher, and normally they're at this stage looking for their first trial, a 30, 50 grand type campaign, which, traditionally speaking, sounds a lot of money for esports. That's great. But the reality is we need to unlock those millions in budgets. If we compare in what they're spending in traditional sports or other medias, it's tiny. So we're scratching the surface. So across the board, I think it starts with us as operators and the industry to ensure that we are really living up to those promises, delivering on those data points, those KPIs, and ultimately an ROI.
I think also when brands come to the big names like the GFINITY and ESL of this world, it's easy for those companies to have a track record, right? So the viewership year on year. It's easy to not promise, but to kind of propose KPIs that you can reach. So in that sense, it's probably reassuring for brands to enter that. But when you look at just campaigns, like what you were saying before, some brands just want to test the waters with a campaign, an activation, whatever you want to call it. Something that is extremely weird. So I run an advertising agency, right? So I come from the advertising world. And the thing that's weird is that they just want to partner with a team, an influencer, whatever, and hope that this is enough. And the thing is, it's not like when you do an advertising campaign, you would always have media buy budget. So how do you avoid to get ganked? You just do whatever you do elsewhere in marketing initiatives. You just decide on a creative idea, pick up the right partner for this, but then you support it with media buy. You work with a media agency to make sure it gets broadcasted to the right audience. Might it be on Twitch, Facebook gaming, just Twitter with the right hashtags or whatever. And I think that's what the missing piece we're seeing so far when it comes to just campaigns is just put the media buy that go with it, and you'll be happy with the results.
I mean, a lot of the big brands actually think if they hire an agency or hire some people, that's done. So they get their numbers, they give a budget, and they feel like, okay, I've done my job, these guys know what they're doing, and then it's off. They will never I mean, I've seen it in my area, they never would, no brand at all would give in any other marketing, traditional advertising, that much freedom to an agency and let them just go and hope for the best. What I said, I mean, before, you have to understand that this is just the beginning and you have to start small and get your little grabs in order. I mean, you have to understand your steps and learn from it and build and build and build. I think that's the first thing you have to learn. The second thing is, don't trust anybody outside. They're just doing the same as you. And all these people claiming they know everything about esports and gaming, it's complete bullshit. I came into this world because my son made me. That's why I built this company, right? And that's a reason for a lot of people why they in gaming or in esports, because their daughter, their son, or their whatever brought them into it. So I had no clue. I know nobody in gaming. But what I know about brands and what you can do with them is more than I need to be successful in this thing, because the game is the same. It's the same what you want to do. You want to reach an audience, you want to engage the audience, you want to give them something they like and keep coming. So if you're a brand marketer, don't think you need the gaming and esports knowledge. It's still the same rules, but you start from scratch and not from a high level. And that's what you have to understand.
Marc, yeah, I was going to say, so just to feed on to that, it's interesting because even the big agencies will come to us and say, we want to do something in gaming, but we don't know what. And if you want to avoid failing in this space, don't ask that question. Come with an idea, come with a plan, come with research stats, and do exactly what you said. Don't rely on an agency to make your plan, or even a tournament operator or a gaming company. Make the plan yourself and then iterate, because we can help you iterate. But if you come and you just say, oh, I don't know what, I just want to do something, it's not going to happen, because then you're going to go back to a single campaign, your KPIs that you put down, you're not going to end up getting, and then you'll go away and you'll think gaming was a failure. That's not how it works.
Marc, I was going to ask you, actually with, say, GFINITY, but also your past experience in sponsorship and partnerships as such. It's very easy taking the money from someone, but to actually make it effective and the activation of it, what are some of the things that, say, when you look at for touch points with someone like GFINITY, or when you were previously, rather than just handing over the money, some of the things that maybe you need to make sure of?
Well, like we've said, I think building realistic KPIs is going to be the first one. Is when you come and you say, I want to sponsor the Super Bowl, that comes with a certain amount of expectations. If you come and you say you want to sponsor League of Legends, that's what you're saying. If you come by and you want to say, I want to sponsor a smaller tournament, or I want to engage with a smaller crowd, defining those KPIs in the proper method is a good way to go. Plus, make sure that your brand identity and your brand message, which goes back to what we were saying, is able to translate into the community that you're talking to. Gamers are probably the loudest community in terms of the ability to talk back of all the communities that we have. So make sure that your message actually resonates with the audience that you're trying to reach. Because otherwise you're going to get what Coke did, which was, I don't want to use an IP and I want to send out a message which is the Coke message. But it doesn't resonate with anyone, and everyone complains about it and doesn't like it. So make sure that you find that point and find that connection to the crowd and to the audience that you're trying to talk to. That's got to be your basic pillar.
We've got a couple of people on the panel who've obviously got some really good experience in media and marketing and advertising, as such as agency side of things. As much as brands and agencies should know their audience, I think esports teams and the community should also understand what the brands and media agencies are looking for in partnerships. You know, how should esports teams or organisations look at packaging themselves or their inventory, and how do they value, what can they sell, and what are some of the pitfalls maybe that you've seen where esports teams should look out for so that they don't piss off a brand as such? And it's because, you know, it's not always any publicity is good publicity.
I think this is a wonderful question because it depends on who's addressing that team. So when it's people that have knowledge, might it be a specific agency, somebody within the advertiser that has esports and gaming knowledge, then they will just go for, they will need to see the entire deck of proposition of different games, what's the roster of talent, just to make sure like the value proposal that the team is going to propose fits the expectation that the experts has. But on the other hand, if you're, we were talking about agencies that have no knowledge about the industry, then they just are looking for ideas on how to enter the space on their behalf. And this is quite crazy because if you look at sports marketing, you never quite see a sports team, do the activation for their sponsors, right? So you would just go for them for the value of sponsors sponsoring the team. But in esports, you can go for a team and have them do the entire activation. So you don't just look for value, you look for advice, you're looking for consulting, and this is probably the one thing that's going to change into the best, hopefully.
I'm just going to finish this as a difficult, well, I shouldn't say difficult question, because you can make anything up you want with this, but look at the crystal ball as to what's going to be happening in the future. Where do you see the future opportunities, and how do you see sponsorship and promotion developing in this burgeoning esports market? You know, what's out there? I mean,
one of the what we see is that the tech will enable a lot more than before because everything is digital, right? So if you know, for example, companies like Anzu.io who do this customized personalized advertising with the publishers in the game, which can be a real like interactive engagement with these clients, that will lead to a lot of new things because you can really get this interaction done not like on TV or radio or whatever. And I think the other thing is that I think the teams have to be, as well as all the surrounding ecosystem partners. I think ESL is a great example how to do a professional to set certain things up, but the whole industry is not yet there. I mean, you can invest in a team and the next 6 months, all the good people you wanted, they're gone. Or you invest in a team which is good in game A, B, which you like, and now suddenly they are in CSGO and Valorant the best. And you as a company have the policy not investing in shooter games, which is stupid by itself. But this is not really professional yet. And I think we need this kind of professionalism from leagues to players, teams, how contracts are handled, etc., to really get there.
And just to extend on that, I think the word in my mind is seamless. I think the more and more successful campaigns we see literally just naturally play into that particular community or event or team sponsorship or whatever. And on top of that, because effectively you're thinking about what's the community want, how do we deliver that, which is the right brand to help us deliver on that. And then that also brings then an opportunity to actually do some direct marketing with these individuals. If you're serving the community in the right way and they're responding in a positive manner, here's your chance as a brand to say, okay, can you buy something, or hey, would you like to capture this moment, or we see a lot of technology to Thomas's point come about to allow us for that direct interaction, and I think that's absolutely key for the next step with esports, because all the other industries, traditional sports and other media markets, they're looking to do the same thing. Esports literally is in a position to do that now.
One question to you though, why is DSL not making everybody who goes there more interactive? All these kids have their phones in their hands. I go to an ASL, whatever kind of thing I go, and I sit there and watch like traditional sports. I don't get it.
I think we're a bit of a large ship sometimes, and actually in the UK we was part of an innovation project with the UK government, and we spent 7 million quid exploring exactly that. But there's a long way to go, and you're right, ESL should be leading that, and we've got some good examples, but not the best. I agree. But next panel, I do talk about this. So
Yeah, no, I like the fact that we have a little bit of debate there, so that's really good. We should probably spend half the afternoon in the boxing ring asking those sort of questions. But I'd like to thank our panellists for providing some of. There's so much more, so please go and approach them, ask them if you've got any more questions and ideas. But I'd like to thank Thomas, Mathieu, and Marc, and James for their participation.
Thank you.